To tell you about what we're going to do. Over 20 years ago, when the group was meeting, I approached members of our support group, of our aphasia group, and I just asked people, everybody has a story. Whoever you are, you've got a story. So I approached everyone, and I said, just tell me your story. What happened to you? And this is the result. And it's all true. Every story we talk about, somebody told me that story. So, here we go. We are the other voices of the aphasia community group. The wives,
husbands, sisters, and brothers,
brothers-in-law,
and sisters-in-law,
children,
friends of those who cannot speak for themselves.
This is our story and their story.
Of how our lives changed when they experienced brain
attack.
It was Halloween. My kids will never forget that because it was the last time their father ever went trick-or-treating with them.
It was a few days after Christmas, and our daughters were home from college.
It was after 5 in the morning when I heard Bob fall.
Peggy had been talking to the traffic department of the local police when she noticed she was losing her speech.
Bill was in the Air Force in Wiesbaden, Germany. We had apple trees in our yard. He had been up on a ladder pruning a tree when he suffered an aneurysm. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that the doctors realized he had also broken his leg when he fell from the tree.
We were on vacation in North Haven, Maine, when Tom had his stroke. 1 minute he was husband, father, doctor, sailor, friend. The next he was hidden beneath a stroke-induced fog.
I thought only very old people had strokes. My husband was 48.
Janice's doctors thought she was suffering from postpartum depression when she complained of pain. But the night before she was due to go home from the hospital with her new baby, she collapsed. She was only 22.
Our daughter's a cappella group was coming to our house to practice and spend the night. A fire was burning in the fireplace and the popcorn was popping. But as the 4 cars of college students pulled into the driveway, the ambulance was pulling out.
It was a successful back operation, and immediately after the surgery, Max seemed fine. 36 hours later, he could not move or speak.
When the police officer asked me why I had called 911, I responded that something was wrong with my husband, but I didn't know what.
I didn't know anyone that had ever had a stroke.
We were fortunate that the whole family was home when it happened.
When Jan didn't show up at Brandeis where she was teaching, the faculty assumed that she was still in Smith College, where she had been rehearsing for the world premiere of a new opera. She lay on the floor in her house in Andover for 3 days before the police broke in and found her.
David could hear his brother knocking on the door, but he couldn't move. He couldn't speak. He couldn't tell him that he needed help. He was alone for 2 days before he was discovered.
Dad was in the hospital in intensive care, and Mother was home alone. We wanted to spend the night with her, but she said no. If she had said yes, we would have found her. She must have been lying on the floor for 11 to 12 hours, all alone.
Pat was never sick. She didn't even have a doctor. So when she didn't feel well, she didn't worry and waited several days before she went to the hospital. By the time she got there, she was no longer able to speak or to write her name or her address.
I had never heard the word aphasia.
Nor had I.
Or I.
or I.
Or I.
In no time, I learned more about strokes and aphasia than I ever cared to know.
My husband couldn't speak. We waited and waited for words, any words, but it never happened.
Howie couldn't say a single word for 3 weeks. They were the longest 3 weeks of my life. And then one day I arrived at the rehab, and his speech therapist were so excited. He had said 3 words: Judy, Julia, and Emily. My name and our daughter's names, and I cried.
The doctors said Mom couldn't read, but we watched her eyes when she looked at the newspaper, and we could see her eyes tracking the words.
Max lost his native language. His speech therapist helped him with English, but his German was gone.
Peggy said she felt like she was thinking in a foreign language.
Jan had always been very religious. When I visited her at the hospital, I brought a small wooden cross. She knew me, but she did not know what the cross was, did not know why I offered it to her. If Jan did not recognize a crucifix, then what else had happened to her?
He said
Yes.
when he meant
No.
and
No.
when he meant
Yes.
I felt as if my heart would break when he couldn't even tell the doctor his name.
The doctor would often ask Tom to hold up 2 fingers. I have a vivid memory of our children standing behind the doctor and encouraging their father by demonstrating with their own fingers what he was supposed to do. They were so eager for their dad to respond correctly.
I looked like such a sad sack that the social worker told me I needed to talk to someone. But I just knew that the only person who would understand how I felt was another spouse of a person with aphasia.
I asked the visiting nurse in our town to give me the names of other people in the same boat as we were, but there were no others.
I was shopping when I spotted a man who obviously had had a stroke. I had so many questions to ask. But what do you say? Hi, do you have aphasia? Or, what a coincidence, my husband looks just like you. I followed him through aisle after aisle until I finally got the nerve to speak.
3 months after my sister-in-law's stroke, we brought her from Chicago to Lexington to live with us.
Our daughter took a semester off from school to help out, take care of her father.
Alan and I had been in a relationship only for 1.5 years, but I couldn't leave him when he needed me.
She always had so many good friends that it was no surprise that when Jan had a stroke, it was her friends who took complete charge.
We had our 24th wedding anniversary while my husband was in the rehab. The anniversary card I received from him was the most beautiful card I had ever gotten during our entire marriage. The friend who chose it was very kind and much more sentimental than my husband.
For weeks, my husband sat in the living room. He just sat there. Years later, he told me what had been going through his mind. He was thinking of ways to die.
We were told the first 6 months were crucial.
All the improvement would happen in the first 6 months.
So we watched and hoped and prayed for any sign of change. And the first 6 months
Came and went. And we discovered that the doctors were right.
and the doctors were
Wrong. Bob's neurologist said he would never walk again, But when he came from the Braintree rehab, he no longer needed a wheelchair.
The rest of the family had given up on my brother-in-law. 3 years after his stroke, he was still completely speechless. I had him tested, and to our surprise, learned that Dad could read, spell, and had 100% comprehension.
I think our mother laughs more now than she ever did. She tells more jokes.
He gets so angry when we don't understand what he is trying to say. He thinks we can read his mind.
If only he could drive.
If only she could just read or write.
If only he could speak.
If only he could taste the food he eats.
He is so frustrated.
She gets angry.
I never dreamed I could learn to live with a man who has no speech, who has no words at all.
Our house is so
Quiet.
I never thought he would drive again, but now he drives everywhere.
I never thought he would ski again, but now he helps others learn to ski.
I never thought he would be able to use his woodworking tools, but he makes toys and picture frames and still fixes anything that is broken.
He has become a jigsaw puzzle expert.
He is a volunteer at a nursing home, and the people there love him.
He swims every day.
She shares the jokes she finds on the internet.
He was able to return to work.
My husband has mastered the wheelchair.
And somehow we all found the Aphasia community group, and for that we are grateful.
When we get together, we talk, we share our stories, ask questions, listen, and learn.
Sometimes we cry.
But more often we laugh.
We laugh a lot together.
And for that we are grateful.
I would just like to introduce our wonderful cast, our playwright and Judy Blatt, Maureen Albano, Leanne Carbonara, not Carbonara, Shella Salina Mark, and cool Carolyn Obelomita.